People thought it was just another winter evening in Paris. They were wrong. Because at 4:31 p.m., the first bell rang. The Champs-Élysées Christmas Market buzzed with its usual glow. Golden lights draped across every stall, children clutching hot chocolate, tourists bargaining for ornaments shaped like mini Eiffel Towers. No one suspected that beneath all this cheerful noise, a secret performance with 100 musicians was seconds from ignition. A young violinist in a red scarf stepped forward near the center of the market. She looked like a normal street performer, humble, quiet, blending into the winter crowd. But hidden in her left ear was a tiny earpiece. And under her gloves, fingers that had practiced for months. She raised her bow. The first note sliced through the air, the haunting, icy opening of Carol of the Bells. Several people turned. One man whispered, "C'est alors, what is this?" Then, from the opposite side of the market, a cellist stood up from a bench and joined her melody. His deep, resonant tone wrapped around her violin like a rushing winter wind. Nobody knew they were just musicians number 1 and number 2. Because behind the churros stand, 3 trumpeters stepped out. Near the carousel, 4 sopranos lifted their voices. And scattered among the crowd, hidden as shoppers, tourists, couples, and vendors, dozens more waited for their cue. The melody thickened, rising like a storm gathering strength. The market lights flickered as if even electricity felt the tension. A little girl tugged her mother's coat. "Maman, is this magic?" The mother didn't answer. Because right then, in the distance, another bell began to ring. The second bell didn't just ring. It commanded. And Paris obeyed. From the far end of the Christmas market, a row of lights blinked in perfect sync, once, twice, 3 times. To the untrained eye it looked like a simple electrical flicker. But to the hidden performers, it was the signal. Suddenly, a chorus of 20 voices emerged from within the crowd. They weren't standing together. They were scattered between vendors, mingling with tourists, holding paper cups and shopping bags. Yet their voices blended with impossible precision, rising in crystalline harmony that made the entire street vibrate. People froze mid-stride. Vendors leaned over their counters. A busker nearby lowered his guitar, realizing he had stumbled into something far bigger than a normal evening performance. The violinist in the red scarf smiled, her bow dancing faster now. The cellist echoed her rhythm with powerful strokes, urging the music toward its next swell. Every measure added another layer: violins, cellos, trumpets, sopranos, altos, each musician stepping out one by one like pieces of a giant puzzle revealing its final image. A group of French police officers, initially confused, paused near the entrance to the market. One of them lifted his phone, recording as the harmonies thickened, swirling around the cold December air like a rising snowstorm. Then, a sudden hush. A silence so sharp and unexpected that even the Christmas carousel stalls stopped ringing for a moment. Musicians froze in place, bows lifted, trumpets raised, voices locked mid-breath. Because above them all, standing quietly on the rooftop of a wooden chalet stall, a conductor appeared, holding a glowing baton. He raised it slowly, and the crowd gasped. No one knew who he was. No one knew how he got up there. But when the conductor lifted his glowing baton, Paris held its breath. For a heartbeat, the entire Champs-Élysées Christmas Market fell into absolute stillness. Even the winter wind seemed to pause, hovering in anticipation. The conductor's coat fluttered behind him as he stood tall above hundreds of stunned onlookers, bathed in the warm halo of market lights. Then, with a sharp, graceful motion, he brought the baton down. Instantly, the orchestra exploded back into life. All 100 musicians revealed themselves at once. Violins surged forward like a wave, bows slicing in perfect unison. Brass players raised their instruments, blasting crisp, triumphant notes that bounced between the chalet rooftops. Sopranos and altos launched into the most powerful vocal section yet, voices intertwining like shimmering threads of ice and fire. The conductor guided them with supernatural accuracy. Every flick of his wrist sent sound rippling across the marketplace, Every sweep of his arm summoned another eruption of musical force. Tourists covered their mouths. Children climbed onto benches for a better view. Vendors abandoned their stalls, stepping into the open with awestruck faces. As the music intensified, snowflakes began drifting down, soft at first, then swirling into a slow, enchanted flurry. People pointed upward, whispering, wondering if the snowfall had been planned, or if the magic of the moment had summoned winter itself. The market shook with the iconic Carol of the Bells motif, fast, sharp, relentless. Musicians moved with precision, their energy unstoppable, their timing flawless. Then, just as the music reached its towering peak, the conductor froze. But he wasn't looking at the orchestra anymore. He was looking at someone in the crowd. The conductor wasn't supposed to break formation. He wasn't supposed to look away. But something, or someone, pulled his attention harder than the music. The orchestra continued playing, but the conductor's eyes stayed locked on a single figure near the front of the crowd. A young boy, maybe 9 years old, holding a tiny wooden recorder. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from longing, the kind of longing only a musician recognizes instantly. The boy had been watching from the very beginning, eyes wide, lips parted, clutching the recorder as if it were a secret dream he'd never dared share aloud. The conductor exhaled. A silent decision was made. With a subtle flick, he signaled a shift in the arrangement. The strings softened. The brass pulled back. The singers dropped to a haunting whisper. The entire performance bent around his command, creating space. Space for something unexpected. The young violinist in the red scarf noticed the conductor's gaze. She followed it, saw the boy, and felt her heartbeat stumble. Without missing a beat of her melody, she stepped toward the crowd, her bow gliding over the strings like a ribbon of light. Around her, musicians began moving too, slowly forming a half-circle that opened toward the boy. The 100-person Flashmob was rearranging itself, inviting him inward. The boy looked up, terrified and thrilled all at once. His mother shook her head, shyly protesting. Nah, he can't, he's just... But the boy stepped forward. Every musician's eyes lit up. The conductor raised his glowing baton again, this time pointing it directly at the child. And with one gentle nod, he gave the boy a silent command. Play. The boy lifted the recorder. The world seemed to shrink to a single breath. And then, he played. A soft, trembling note floated into the cold December air. It was fragile at first, barely loud enough to rise above the whispering crowd. But something about its purity, its innocence, cut straight through the heart of every musician present. The conductor's eyes softened. The violinist in the red scarf smiled through tears she didn't expect. And one by one, the entire orchestra reshaped itself around the child's melody. The recorder sang a simple counterline to Carol of the Bells, weaving delicately between the rushing violins and booming brass. It shouldn't have worked. But somehow, it was perfect. The crowd erupted in goosebumps. Parents lifted their children onto their shoulders. Street vendors leaned forward with hands over their hearts. Even the French police officers who'd been watching earlier now stood motionless, eyes glistening, phones lowered, letting the moment live unfiltered. Snow began falling harder, swirling in wide, dreamy arcs above the 100 musicians. The conductor guided them through one final crescendo, a rising tower of sound so powerful it felt like the Christmas market itself was holding its breath. And then, a roaring, triumphant final chord. The music exploded into the sky. Lights along the Champs-Élysées flickered in dazzling synchronization. Voices, strings, brass, percussion, everything collided into one breathtaking, cathedral-like burst of sound that echoed down the entire boulevard. Silence. A stunned, shimmering silence. Then, the crowd erupted. Screams. Applause. Cheers that shook the wooden stalls. People cried, laughed, hugged strangers. And in the middle of it all, the little boy stood frozen, recorder still in hand, overwhelmed. The conductor stepped down from the rooftop. He walked straight to the child. Kneeling, he whispered, "Music chose you. Remember that." The boy nodded, and Paris roared again.